Hello everyone. This is our lecture discussion for topic 2, which will be focusing on science and technology across history. By the way, I do apologize if my voice is hoarser or deeper than usual. It's because I am currently sick. That's why my voice is like this. But as long as you can understand what I'm talking about, that is all that matters. So, let's dive right in. These are our objectives for this lesson. At the end of the lesson, you, the students, should be able to do the following: discuss how ancient inventions and discoveries changed the world over the course of history. Second, explain how these ancient inventions and discoveries made their impacts to the cultural, political, and economic perspectives of the people. And then, last but not the least, you're going to create a timeline of inventions and discoveries that influence now the development of society throughout the different generations. Now, for your activity, the timeline, kindly refer to the Google Classroom for further instructions. I have already posted there. I've already posted there the rubric or the criteria for checking your timeline. Kindly check that. It will serve as a guide regarding the the different criterions that I'm going to focus on while I'm checking your timeline. At the same way, some of the things that you need to consider while you're creating your timeline, it's all written or it's all included in our Google Classroom. So kindly check that one. So without further ado, let us start. So it says there that SDS has been around from the beginning of time. Although they did not call it science or technology back then, the main point is that people were already doing it. The moment that people started, questioning or thinking about their surroundings, building something or building, infrastructures or crafts and so on and so forth, SDS is already present. But a characteristic of SDS is that it always changes. I'm sorry, is it's always changing. It is always evolving. So in our first discussion, I mentioned that the types of technologies that we have today are very different from the types of technologies they had back then. So every era, every time period has their own kinds of technologies that actually suited their period. But even though SDS is, continually evolving or it's continually changing through time, the main thing is that it always tries to improve the way of life of the people. Even at present, we can see that technologies are being built because we want to make our lives better. Next, we can see here that since we're basically talking about, science and technology across history, let's go back to our history and see how science and technology have developed through the different periods. So we have here during the prehistoric times. So your Stone Age is divided into three main periods. The first one, we call it the Paleolithic, or in English, the Old Stone Age. Now, what are the characteristics of this period? Basically, people were considered or are known as nomads. When we say nomads, the people back then did not have permanent settlements, no permanent address, meaning they moved from one place to another. For example, after finishing the resources or food resources in one area of the forest, they moved to another area, always looking for food. So that was their way of life back then. Another is their use of simple stone tools for survival. Their tools were unrefined stones that actually helped them for their survival during the Old Stone Age. Next, we have here your Mesolithic period, or also known as the Middle Stone Age. Now, in this particular age, their tools started evolving or changing. It actually became better because from simple stone tools, the stones became more sophisticated. They created sharp tools from stones which actually helped them in their hunting or yes, in their hunting of animals or in their gathering of resources. And but another highlight of the Mesolithic era is the discovery of fire. So this discovery changed how people lived forever. So from being nomads, they started creating villages, cooking their own food, and even, domesticating animals. So they were no longer afraid of the night or the predators of the night because they had light. They already had fire. So the fire served many purpose for the people during this time. And then we have here, after your Mesolithic period, the Neolithic era, or what we call the New Stone Age. Neo meaning new. During this time, society became more complex because the villages started to expand. They created now large communities. And as you can see from the pictures, there are houses and infrastructures that are being built to actually accommodate the growing population. So this was the time that farming and agriculture using, advanced tools became their main food source. At the same time, people started creating various tools like pots and textiles which were very helpful in their way of life. Next, we have here the Metal Age. So this is also, divided into three main periods, but I'm not going to explain those one by one. I just want you to know the main gist of the Metal Age. Basically, from the name itself, it's the time when metals became very valuable. So humans learned how to melt and work with metals. So they created tools and weapons that are made for um, um, wars and defense, and in other or in many more other areas. Then after your prehistoric times, we experience what we call the rise of different civilizations. And each civilization actually contributed in science or in the advancement of science and technology. So there are a lot of civilizations. I know that you are familiar with some of them. To name a few, we have there the Chinese, the Greek, the Roman, and even Mesopotamian civilization. So for this part, let me repeat, by the way, that each civilization contributed to the advancement of humanity. For example, in the creation of infrastructures like the pyramids that are located in various parts of the world, it was created due to human intellect. People were able to use mathematics and geometry to calculate the size, and weight of their buildings and how they should fit together. Another example, the Romans, they learned from the Greeks. Kaya there is a notion that though I'm not saying that it's there is a notion that in history the Romans copied or learned a lot from the Greeks. So Europe in general learned a lot from countries in Asia like China because of trade. So there is, a passing of knowledge and information from those ideas we enhance now, or people enhance their own ideas, making their own ideas better due to the passing or the exchange of information from different areas or from different civilizations, because civilizations or places that are located in Europe, due to trade in different parts of Asia, there is now an exchange of technologies, goods, and information. I'm sorry. So after your ancient civilizations, we have the early Middle Ages and your Renaissance period. So this period is very important because it actually opened the world to new ideas which would now be the foundation of modern society. Let's start first with your early Middle Ages, or what we call as the Dark Ages. So why did they call this period the Dark Ages in the first place? Because during this time, the people, specifically in Europe, experienced a very chaotic and unstable time. The society experienced intellectual decline, economic decline, and even cultural decline. Even diseases, even diseases at this time were very prevalent. People were poor and suffering. Wars were going on in different parts of Europe. So overall, it was not a very peaceful time. Moreover, one prominent figure during this time was the power of the church. The church was very influential during the Dark Ages. So whatever the church said, the people obeyed. But the problem was the church was very corrupt during the Dark Ages. They were actually selling church positions, meaning if you want to have a position inside the church, you have to buy it using gold or money or other resources. So it was not a very peaceful time during the Dark Ages. But after the period of chaos and unrest that the Dark Ages have let the people experience, there is hope because the Renaissance period entered, or the Renaissance period happened. Renaissance means rebirth. Rebirth from what, actually? Rebirth from the Dark Ages, like moving away from the Dark Ages. So, rebirth from chaos, rebirth from intellectual and economic decline. And the Renaissance period highlighted the concept of humanism. What is humanism? Basically, it's about giving importance to human abilities. Humanism says that people are capable of being creative. Humans are intelligent creatures that can actually innovate, build things, and create new ideas. That humans have, great potential. That is the concept of humanism. And later on, humanism started what we call the intellectual movement. So it gave importance to people's education. However, still, education during this time was only open to those who were wealthy and noble. But during the intellectual movement, a lot of prominent figures or important people contributed in science and technology. So let's take a look at some of those important people. First, we have there Ptolemy, who is known as the man who moved the sun. And why is he called that? Because of his geocentric model of the universe. At present, at present, we know that the sun is at the center of our solar system and it is surrounded by planets. But during the Dark Ages, this was not known to man. Instead, what they believed in, which was strongly taught by the church, is that the planet Earth is at the center of the universe, and then we have there the sun, like for example, in this picture, and we have the sun, the moon, and other planets revolving around our planet Earth. So, no one went against this idea at first, since it was taught by the church and it was the one that it was believed by the people. Excuse me. But later on, the geocentric model was challenged by another prominent figure. We have here Nicholas Copernicus. So according to Copernicus, the earth is not the center. but it's actually the sun. And he called this the heliocentric model. So the church got, very angry with Copernicus because he was going against the teachings of the church that was made by Ptolemy. So they rejected the idea of Copernicus. But later on, we have another figure, prominent figure during this time, and he is Galileo Galilei. Now, he created the telescope, which allowed him actually to know whether the geocentric model is true or the heliocentric model is the one that is true. And because of his telescope, they learned that the theory of Copernicus is true. But because of his discovery, again, the church placed him under house arrest because he was also going against, or he was challenging the authority of the church. So they did not like the idea of Copernicus and Galileo Galilei. The problem is, even though the evidence is already there, because he invented the telescope, he was able to see the truth. But because during that time, um, old ideas or traditional ideas was very strong in the society, people rejected that new kind of information. So we can see here the once again the relevance of science, due to evidences. We can see the importance of science. Old ideas that are wrong needs to be refuted or needs to be changed. So as for the scientific revolution, we call it a revolution because there were drastic changes in the views of the people and the society due to the emergence of different ideas, especially in modern science or scientific thought, such as, mathematics, physics, even politics and sociology, even natural sciences, and so on and so forth. This was a period wherein those ideas were very prevalent. For example, in the field of politics, by the way, there are a lot of prominent figures in different fields, but just to name a few. So we have here Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. So Thomas Hobbes have this famous book called Leviathan, and he explained in his book that society needs a leader that holds absolute power. Why? It's because humans by nature are very selfish and they are very greedy. They only think about themselves, their needs, and their wants. And since they think about themselves, they are very chaotic and are not able to keep peace. That's why, as a result, society um, experiences war, we experience conflict, and at the very end, society will collapse. That's why, according to Thomas Hobbes, we need now a strong leader. But the downside of this theory is it limits now the liberties or the freedom of the people. And at the same time, how can we make sure, or how can the people make sure that their leader does not fall under tyranny? So Thomas Hobbes during this time was very controversial because of this particular idea. On the other hand, we have a different person who advocated for social contract theory. From the word itself, contract. So meaning the people and the state will come now to an agreement, a mutual agreement. Both parties having, responsibilities or shared responsibilities, a give and take solution. So, under your social contract theory, the government will provide its people services such as healthcare, education, protection, and so on and so forth. And in return, the people will vote, exercise their political rights, pay their taxes, and obey the laws. And at the same time, if the government does not do their part in, protecting their people, giving them a better life, then the people are allowed to remove their leaders through a revolution. So, your social contract theory, which was advocated by John Locke, became now the basis of democracy, which is basically practiced in other countries. For example, here in our country, the Philippines. Moving on, in the field of natural sciences, we have here Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. Under your theory of evolution, he explained that species actually come from one common ancestor. But due to the changes of their environment, species now have to adapt, which now basically created a diversity of genes. Because if they do not adapt, they will not survive, which we go back again to the concept of survival of the fittest. For example, monkeys or primates that lived in hotter regions are basically accustomed to the climate there. And then we also have other monkeys or primates that are accustomed to living in colder regions. So it's basically the concept of adaptation. How will you survive in your environment? That is according to Charles Darwin. Now, in the field of psychology, we have your famous best friend, Sigmund Freud. Maybe you have heard of him or have learned some of his ideas. And he is known as the father of psychoanalysis and the father of psychosexual theory. But for this particular part, I want to focus more on psychoanalysis theory. So, according to Sigmund Freud, there are many unconscious and conscious factors that influence our behaviors and emotions. And there are two divisions of psychoanalysis. First is your topographical, and then the second one is your structural. Now, what is the difference between the two? Under your topographical model, we have the conscious, subconscious, and the unconscious. So, what is the difference between these three? Okay, for the conscious part, Sigmund Freud explained that this is about our thoughts and perceptions, and usually they are short term. Why short term? For example, while walking, you saw a car. Then suddenly I ask you to, describe your thoughts about the car. What do you think about that car? So you explain about its color, the type of engine maybe, the size, the brand, and so on and so forth. So your consciousness is any of your thoughts and perceptions that you felt at the present moment because of the experience or event you've been through. Next, we have your subconscious, also known as the preconscious. So this is considered as the seat of your memories. This is where we draw um, from when we remember something. These are things that you do not remember at the moment, but when we do it or when you remember it, it comes back to us. For example, if I ask you to describe yourself when you were young, so basically your brain will go back to your past memories. That is why your subconscious is considered as your long-term memory or the seat of your memories. Then last is your unconscious. This is where your hidden desires, your fears, your instincts are stored, your trauma, aggression, even sexual desires or immoral urges or maybe shameful experiences are all stored under your unconscious area. That is why when we try to understand the topographical model of Sigmund Freud, they liken it or they pattern it into an iceberg. Because if you look at an iceberg, at the surface, you think that the iceberg is small. But once you go underwater or under the waters, more of its body is actually hidden from plain sight. So it's the same thing. Your consciousness is at the tip of the iceberg, these are the things that we only want people to see. Then going further, we have your subconscious and then your unconscious that are actually hidden from the sight of other people. So that is the topographical model. Under the structural, on the other hand, this model, the structural model, explains now how your id, ego, and superego works, how we should balance those three personalities. Your id is the impulsive side because it only focuses on human pleasure, our wants, our desires. For example, babies, when they want something, or if they are hungry, or if they want a hug, or if they want something from their parents, they cry because they want their needs to be quickly satisfied. Your superego, on the other hand, is considered as the moral compass, your conscience or your moral standards that guides our behavior or our actions. Ego, on the other hand, is considered as the rational side. So it balances your id and superego. It helps us, have a better way to understand our actions, or how should we decide on this particular event. So your ego is the one that rationalizes our thoughts and our actions. Now, to help you have a better way of understanding how your id, ego, and superego actually work, let's have some few examples. So we have here a scenario wherein you are feeling hungry. So gutom ka. So your id, since it is very impulsive, it will directly say that I need to eat right at this second. Whether I am at school, whether I'm at class, whether I'm at the meeting, I need to eat right now because I am hungry. So it wants to be quickly satisfied. However, your superego now would interject because it is focused on your conscience, on your morality side. So it will say that you can't do that because you're in the middle of an important meeting, or maybe you are at the middle of class, or class is ongoing. So you can't do that. So what will your ego do now? Since it is, excuse me, since it is um, your rational side, it will now intervene between your id and then your ego. So your ego will say that we're going to finish our class first, or we're going to finish this meeting first, and then afterwards we can go out and treat ourselves something to eat. That is how your ego will intercede. A rational decision will come forth between your id and then your superego. Another example, same scenario, okay? So your id is saying that you want to eat all the cookies in the jar right at this moment. But your superego, since it is focused on our conscience and our ideals, it will say that I will feel guilty for eating cookies. At the same time, maybe it will cause me some health concerns because cookies have too much sugar in them, and so on and so forth. Your ego, being the mediator between your id and then your superego, will come now with a rational decision, saying, I will have one cookie now, and then I will eat more cookies later. So we can see here how your id, your ego, and your superego work together, balances the personality, making now right decisions under certain or under specific circumstances. So it's very important that our we have a balanced personality between our id, ego, and superego, because it's not okay that we only focus on our id, focusing on our wants, our desires, and it's not also good that become very idealistic under your superego. So your ego will always rationalize, create a rational decision based on your id and then your superego. Ayan. So, that is, I'm sorry, excuse me. So, that is the end of our discussion for topic number 2. But I have a question here. So, I have a question here just to summarize or to conclude most of the information and ideas that we have discussed so far. It says there that what is the importance of these ideas? Because we learned a while ago different or many historical figures and different ideas. But why are these ideas important in the first place? Well, because basically it shaped now our society. It became the foundation of how we understand our surroundings, our society in general, from politics to societal factors up until human behavior. Our beliefs, our perception, and even our behavior is shaped by the ideas and information that are present. Even back then, the types of information that they had during those times basically shaped the perceptions of the people, shaped how the society functions or how the society works. And at present, it's the same way. The types of ideas that we have now, they are the ones that are shaping our ideas, our beliefs at present. Okay? So I do hope that you've learned a thing or two from our discussion, and I will be seeing you in our next discussion, which is going to focus on science, technology, and nation building. So, thank you everyone for listening, and goodbye.